The sun was slowly rising when the military son finally stepped off the bus that brought him back to his hometown. His uniform carried the marks of years spent far from home, but his eyes carried something even deeper: relief and longing. He had counted every day until this return. The thought of hugging his mother again gave him more strength than medals or training ever had. His boots hit the familiar dusty road, and with each step, memories from childhood rushed back: the laughter in the backyard, the smell of his mother's cooking, the warm evenings when she would tell him stories before bed. The small town seemed quieter than he remembered. The old shops looked older, and the streets carried fewer faces than before. But what mattered most was the little white house at the end of the lane, where his mother had waited for him all these years. He imagined her sitting in her rocking chair, probably looking out the window, hoping every sound outside was him. That thought alone brought tears to his eyes, though he quickly wiped them away. Years of military discipline taught him to be strong, but here, walking toward the house where he grew up, he felt like a little boy again. As he walked up the driveway, he noticed the front porch had a few boards replaced recently. The paint was fresh on one side of the house but peeling badly on the other. His mother never liked to let the house fall apart, so it seemed she had found someone to help with the repairs. That was not surprising: she was strong, but age had slowed her down, and she had probably needed help for a while. He stood at the door for a moment, taking a deep breath, almost nervous. Then he knocked gently before opening it. The sound of his mother's voice calling his name filled the air, and suddenly she was there, in front of him, hugging him tightly. Her arms were thin, but the love in her embrace was stronger than anything he had faced in combat. He held her for a long time, feeling the warmth of home that he had missed more than words could say. They sat together at the kitchen table, where the smell of coffee filled the room. His mother poured him a cup with shaking hands, her eyes shining with pride. She asked him about his time away, and he tried to answer without burdening her with the hard parts. Instead, he spoke about the good moments, the friendships, the lessons, the honor of serving. She listened carefully, nodding, sometimes wiping her eyes. He noticed the lines on her face had deepened since he last saw her, and guilt tugged at his heart for all the birthdays and holidays he had missed. As they talked, he noticed something unusual. Whenever the conversation turned to the house, his mother quickly changed the subject. When he asked about the repairs, she gave short answers, almost as if she didn't want to say much. She mentioned a handyman who had been helping her lately, but her voice carried hesitation. The soldier had been trained to observe people, every detail, every flicker of expression, and he picked up on the unease immediately. It was small, but clear. Later, when he stepped outside to look at the yard, he saw the handyman for the first time. A tall man in worn clothes, carrying tools, moving around as though he owned the place. The soldier raised his hand politely to greet him, but the handyman barely nodded, his eyes cold, sizing him up. Something about his presence felt wrong: an arrogance in his walk, a sharpness in his gaze. The soldier didn't say much, but inside, his instincts were alert. Years of military service had taught him that danger often hid behind ordinary faces. He went back inside, keeping his thoughts to himself. His mother smiled, trying to make everything feel normal, but he couldn't shake the unease. That night, as he lay in his old room, surrounded by childhood memories, he couldn't sleep. He thought about his mother's nervous glance, the handyman's unfriendly look, and the way the house felt different, like shadows lingered even when the lights were on. He promised himself he would keep watch. Coming home was supposed to be about peace and rest, but now, it felt like his training was still needed. His battlefield was no longer far away, it was right here, in the home he had sworn to protect as a boy. And deep down, he knew something was about to happen, something that would test him in a way he had never expected. The next morning, the soldier woke up early to the sound of hammers and tools outside. His instincts pulled him from his bed faster than an alarm. He moved toward the window and saw the handyman working on the fence, moving with an air of ownership rather than service. The man's shoulders were squared, his chin lifted, as if he was in charge. Something about the way he walked across the yard bothered the soldier deeply. This wasn't the humble, respectful attitude of someone who was helping an elderly woman maintain her home. He dressed quickly and went downstairs, where his mother was already in the kitchen making breakfast. She greeted him with a smile, but he noticed the weariness in her eyes. She avoided mentioning the handyman, even though his hammering echoed through the house. When the soldier asked about the work being done, she simply said, "He's been helping around. I couldn't manage some of the heavier things myself." Her words were short, and her hands trembled slightly as she placed the plate in front of him. He didn't press her, not yet. Instead, he kept the conversation light, listening carefully to her tone. Years of training had taught him to read not just words, but the pauses, the hesitation, and the weight behind them. Something wasn't right. After breakfast, he decided to walk through the house to see the repairs for himself. Some jobs looked rushed, almost careless: crooked shelves, loose screws, and paint smudged in places it shouldn't be. He frowned. His mother was the type to notice every detail, so why would she accept work like this? Unless she felt she had no choice. Later that afternoon, he stepped outside to introduce himself properly. The handyman turned, wiping sweat from his forehead, and smirked slightly. "You must be her boy," he said, his tone carrying no warmth. "Back from the army, huh?" The soldier nodded calmly, extending his hand, but the handyman's handshake was weak and dismissive. It was a clear gesture of disrespect. The conversation was short, filled with small comments that didn't sit well. The handyman made jokes about how much work the house needed and how he was the only one around to take care of it. His words carried an edge, as though he was reminding both the mother and son of his presence and importance. That evening, as the soldier sat with his mother on the porch, he gently tried to ask more. "Do you trust him?" he asked quietly. His mother shifted uncomfortably, looking away. "He's been helping," she repeated. But her eyes told another story, a flicker of unease, as if she was hiding something. The soldier stayed silent, but inside, his suspicion grew. He decided to stay alert and watch every interaction. That night, lying in bed, he thought back to his time in service. He remembered missions where danger was disguised behind smiles and handshakes. This handyman reminded him of those situations, people who hid their intentions until it was too late. Over the next few days, he kept noticing signs. His mother jumped slightly when the handyman spoke too loudly. She seemed to walk carefully, avoiding upsetting him. Once, when the handyman entered the kitchen, her cheerful face faded, replaced by quiet worry. The soldier caught all of this, storing it in his mind. He knew now that his instincts were right. His mother was not comfortable, and she was too afraid or too protective to admit it. He also noticed how the handyman acted differently when he thought no one was watching. There was a harshness in his voice, a sharpness in his movements. Once, from the upstairs window, the soldier saw him throw a tool angrily at the ground, muttering to himself. His jaw clenched as he paced, as though he owned the space. The soldier decided not to confront him yet. Instead, he watched, waited, and planned. He wanted the truth to come out, not just for himself but for his mother, who had clearly been living under pressure. He knew that patience was as much a weapon as strength. One evening, he offered to help his mother in the kitchen. While chopping vegetables, he asked softly, "Why didn't you call me sooner?" She froze, the knife in her hand trembling slightly. "I didn't want to trouble you," she whispered. "You were out there serving the country. I didn't want to add to your burdens." His heart ached. He placed his hand gently on hers, steadying her. "You are never a burden," he said firmly. "You raised me. You stood by me all these years. I would come home in a second if you needed me." She gave a small smile, but tears filled her eyes. She still didn't speak the full truth, but the silence between her words confirmed his fears. Something was wrong. That night, as the soldier lay awake, he made a decision. He would protect his mother, no matter what. The handyman's mask of helpfulness was slipping, and the soldier was ready for what might come. He had faced storms, battlefields, and enemies abroad, but now, the real battle was inside his own home. And deep down, he knew the confrontation was coming soon. The soldier's patience finally reached its edge one late afternoon. He had spent days watching carefully, reading every sign, every detail, waiting for proof. His instincts told him the danger was real, and he knew that sooner or later, the truth would show itself clearly. That day came when he stepped quietly into the house after running an errand and heard raised voices in the living room. His mother's voice was soft but shaky, filled with fear as she tried to calm the handyman down. The handyman's voice was sharper, filled with anger and authority, demanding things that made the soldier's blood boil. The words were not only disrespectful but also carried a tone of control, as though he believed he owned the place. The soldier froze for a moment, listening, his chest tightening as he realized this was worse than he had thought. His mother was scared inside her own home. He moved quickly, his steps silent from years of training. As he rounded the corner, he saw the handyman standing too close to his mother, his hand gripping her arm tightly. She tried to pull away, but he refused to let go. The sight made the soldier's heart race with anger, but his military discipline kept him calm. Rage could cloud judgment, and he needed to be sharp. "Let go of her," the soldier said, his voice low but firm. It carried the weight of command, the same tone he had used on the battlefield. The handyman froze, his grip loosening slightly, then turned with a scowl. "This is between us," the handyman snapped, trying to sound in control. But his eyes flickered nervously, recognizing that he was no longer the strongest man in the room. The soldier stepped forward slowly, his posture tall and unshaken. "No," he replied, his voice steady. "This is my mother, and this is my home. Whatever you think you can do here ends right now." His mother's eyes filled with tears of relief, but she remained silent, too shaken to speak. The handyman tried to stand his ground, puffing up his chest, but he could not match the soldier's calm authority. Years of training had taught the son how to de-escalate situations with control rather than chaos. He didn't need to raise his fist, his presence alone was enough. Still, the handyman tried to act brave. "You don't know what you're talking about," he muttered. "She needs me. This house needs me." The soldier stepped even closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous calm. "She doesn't need fear. She doesn't need threats. And she doesn't need you." His eyes locked on the handyman's, unblinking, unwavering, until the man's confidence began to crack. The tension in the room was thick. For a moment, the handyman looked like he might lash out, but the soldier stood ready, his stance unshakable. Every movement of his body signaled readiness, discipline honed through years of combat. The handyman must have seen it too, because his bravado began to fade. His hand slipped from the mother's arm, and he stepped back, muttering angrily under his breath. The soldier gently placed himself between his mother and the handyman, shielding her. He didn't shout, didn't lose control, but his voice carried finality when he said, "You're leaving. Right now." The handyman hesitated, but the soldier's gaze left no room for argument. He grabbed his tools angrily, slamming them into his bag, and stormed toward the door. Before stepping out, he turned and hissed, "You'll regret this." But the soldier didn't flinch. He simply closed the door behind him, his jaw tight, his body still tense, as if ready for more. Only when the door shut did his mother finally break down, her shoulders shaking as tears flowed. The soldier turned and wrapped her gently in his arms, holding her the way she used to hold him when he was a boy afraid of nightmares. Now the roles had reversed. He was the shield, the protector, the one who would never let harm come her way again. He whispered softly, "It's over, Mom. He's gone. You don't have to be afraid anymore." But deep down, he knew it wasn't truly over. People like the handyman didn't give up easily. The soldier stayed alert, ready for what might come next. He had faced enemies before, and he knew the difference between a retreat and a pause. This wasn't the end, it was only the beginning of a larger truth waiting to be revealed. That night, as his mother finally slept peacefully, the soldier sat by the window, watching the dark street. His heart was heavy, but his resolve was clear. He had caught the danger in time, but now he wanted answers. Why had his mother suffered in silence? How long had this been happening? And most importantly, what else was the handyman hiding? The confrontation had ended for the moment, but the story was far from finished. The house felt different after the confrontation. It was quieter, but not in a peaceful way. The silence carried weight, like a heavy curtain pulled across every corner. The soldier stayed close to his mother, watching her carefully. She moved around the kitchen, trying to act normal, but her hands trembled when she held the kettle, and her eyes avoided his whenever he tried to meet them. He knew there was more she hadn't told him. That evening, as they sat at the kitchen table, he reached across and gently placed his hand on hers. "Mom," he said softly, "you don't have to hide anymore. Tell me the truth. I need to know everything." For a long moment, she said nothing. Her lips pressed together, her shoulders shaking slightly. Then she took a deep breath, her eyes filling with tears. "I didn't want you to come home to this," she whispered. "I wanted you to feel peace here, not more battles." The soldier's chest tightened, but he stayed calm. "Peace comes from truth," he said. "And from knowing you're safe." Her tears fell then, and with them, the truth she had carried alone for too long. She told him how the handyman had first come offering to help with small repairs. At first, he seemed friendly, and she was grateful for the help. But over time, his behavior changed. He grew pushy, making himself part of her daily life. He would show up uninvited, linger too long, and speak with a tone that made her feel trapped. She admitted that she had been afraid to speak out, afraid no one would believe her, and afraid of what he might do if she pushed him away. The soldier listened in silence, his jaw tight but his voice steady. Every word she spoke was like a knife in his heart, but he knew she needed to let it out. When she finished, he took her hand firmly. "You're not alone anymore," he said. "I'm here now, and I won't let anyone hurt you again." She nodded, her relief clear, but her worry still present. "He's not the kind of man who gives up easily," she whispered. "He wants control. If he feels it slipping away, he'll try to take it back." The soldier already knew that. He had seen the look in the handyman's eyes before, the look of someone who hated losing power. It was the same look he had seen in hostile places far away. Men like that didn't just walk away. The next day, the soldier decided to learn more. He visited a neighbor across the street, an older man who had lived in the neighborhood for decades. When he mentioned the handyman's name, the neighbor frowned. "That man's trouble," the neighbor said. "People around here have had problems with him before. He's worked odd jobs for years, but somehow there's always complaints. Things missing, people feeling uneasy. But no one wanted to deal with the fight of accusing him." The soldier's suspicion deepened. It wasn't just his mother, this man had a history. He thanked the neighbor and returned home, his resolve even stronger. He realized his mother had been living with this shadow over her life, and probably feeling like no one would stand with her. That thought made him more determined than ever. That evening, he sat with his mother again, this time in the living room where the light from the lamp made everything feel warmer. "You were strong to handle this alone," he told her. but you don't have to be strong by yourself anymore. From now on, we face this together." For the first time in days, his mother smiled a true smile, though faint. "I prayed every night for you to come home," she admitted. "And now you're here. Maybe it was meant to happen this way." The soldier nodded. He didn't believe in chance. He believed in responsibility. And his responsibility now was to protect the woman who had protected him all his life. Later that night, as he lay awake, he thought about everything. The handyman's arrogance, his mother's fear, the neighbor's warning, all of it formed a clear picture. This was not over. The handyman would try to come back, but the soldier was ready. He had fought for his country, now he would fight for his family. He looked around his old room, filled with childhood memories, and realized how much it all meant to him. This house was more than wood and paint. It was where his mother had given him strength, where he had learned to dream, where love had carried him through the hardest times. No one had the right to make it a place of fear. The soldier closed his eyes, not to sleep, but to plan. He would protect his mother not only with his strength but also by making sure the truth was known. The handyman's past could no longer stay hidden. His mask had already begun to slip, and soon, everyone would see who he really was. And when that happened, his mother would finally be free from the fear that had haunted her for too long. The next morning, the soldier woke with a clear mind and a steady plan. His mother had finally shared the truth, and the weight of her burden now rested on both their shoulders. He no longer saw himself only as her son, he was her shield, her voice, and her strength. The handyman had taken advantage of her kindness and silence for too long, but those days were over. The first step was making sure his mother felt safe again. He checked every lock on the windows and doors, replaced weak bolts, and repaired the fence himself. His military hands, used to handling weapons and heavy equipment, now worked carefully on his childhood home. With each nail he drove in, he felt like he was building not just a stronger house, but also a stronger promise to his mother that she would never again face fear inside these walls. She watched from the porch, her eyes filled with both pride and relief. Later that day, the soldier visited the local authorities. He explained what had been happening, calmly but firmly. His words carried weight not because he raised his voice, but because of the truth behind them. The officer who listened had known his family for years, and when he heard how the handyman had treated his mother, his face hardened. The soldier also shared what the neighbor had told him, and the officer admitted that there had been other quiet complaints about the same man, though no one had pressed charges before. This time would be different. The soldier wasn't just speaking for his mother, he was speaking for every neighbor who had felt uneasy but stayed silent. His determination gave strength to others, and soon, stories from different families began to surface. The handyman's pattern of arrogance, intimidation, and carelessness became clear. When the authorities finally called the handyman in, he tried to act bold, claiming he was only doing work and that people were ungrateful. But under questioning, his mask cracked. His history of complaints and dishonesty came to light. He had fooled many for years, but now the truth stood against him like a wall too high to climb. Meanwhile, back at the house, the soldier sat with his mother. She was still shaken, but the fear in her eyes had begun to fade. "I should have told you sooner," she said quietly. He squeezed her hand gently. "You were trying to protect me. Now it's my turn to protect you." For the first time in months, she laughed softly, the sound filling the room with warmth. It wasn't a laugh of joy, but of relief, like a weight had finally been lifted from her chest. The days that followed brought peace back to the house. The handyman was no longer a shadow at the door. Neighbors who once stayed quiet now came by to visit, offering support, sharing meals, and checking in. The community, once silent, had found courage through the soldier's actions. The soldier himself felt something shift inside. For years, he had fought battles far from home, always focused on protecting the country. But now, standing in his mother's living room, he realized that sometimes the greatest battles were fought in the quiet corners of ordinary life. Protecting family was as important as protecting a nation. One evening, as the sun set over the small town, the soldier and his mother sat on the porch together. The sky glowed orange and gold, and the air was filled with the soft sounds of crickets. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and for the first time since he had returned, she looked completely at peace. "You're home now," she whispered. "That's all I ever needed." He wrapped an arm around her, his heart full. "And I'm not going anywhere," he promised. "This is where I belong." In that moment, the long journey, the battles, the hardships, all of it made sense. He had come back not just to visit, but to stay, to rebuild, to give his mother the life she deserved. The handyman had tried to bring fear, but what remained was love, strength, and unity. The story that had begun with shadows ended in light. A mother who had once stood alone now stood with her son beside her. And a soldier who had faced countless dangers realized that the greatest victory of his life was right here, protecting the woman who had given him everything.